Esta conferencia comenzará a grabarse.
Bom dia, António. Como estás?
Bom dia, Jaime. Bonjour,
Mais-
Sebastián.
Here in Oporto is raining a lot, and in your town is raining too.
No, here we are very, very well now.
Oh,
The
okay,
sunny.
very good. Okay.
Guten Morgen, Nina. No, the sound is not very good, Nina. No, no good at all. No, there is a lot of noise, something like. No, you should disconnect and connect again, Nina. Bon dia, Aurora. Buongiorno, Roberto, and the rest.
Bom dia.
Bon dia. Morning, Theodora.
Good morning from Sofia.
I'm glad to see you here.
Yes, I'm here.
Today we will be discussing about a very, very interesting topics since kind of conclusory session.
Really looking forward to it.
Welcome, Ula. Good morning. Guten Morgen.
Good morning, Antonio.
Happy to see you here. Buongiorno, Rafaela.
Buongiorno. Hello. Good morning.
Hello, Rafaela.
Good
Glad
morning.
to see you here too. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. How are you?
Fine, fine. Very nice morning here. Sunny.
Here. Yes, the same is here.
Buenos días, Tony.
Good morning.
Buenos días, good morning.
Buen día, Antonio.
So, as you know, we try to be very, very sharp with the time, okay? I will introduce briefly for those that are new to these sessions. The scheme proposed is divided in 3 blocks. The first one is the conceptual one. The second is about needs, and the third is about potential solutions. We try to be very respectful of the times, just to be to give everyone the opportunity to speak, or if not everyone, most of you. Okay, so we will have a clock. We also try to be flexible, so if there is some important comments about what somebody has just said, we will allow you to do that, okay? But in a please very brief, to the point way. Say that today the main topic is social economy and innovation. We have excellent speakers as always, but today in this case, thank you very much everyone joining us today, and I will give the floor immediately to Karel. Welcome, Karel.
Hello, Antonio. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you want
Okay,
to
perfect.
present? Should I
Yes.
give you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if that's possible. I will share screen. Can you
Perfect. We
see
are
my
seeing.
screen?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I am already too far.
Don't worry.
So I will maybe put it on big screen. Okay.
Perfect.
You can see it or not?
Not in big screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to manage.
Now.
It will not now.
I think now.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. Now.
Okay, so perfect. Yeah,
Perfect.
I never did it with the PowerPoint. So good morning. I will give you a brief introduction in the work that we have been carried out over, let's say, the last year with a subgroup of our expert group on social economy. So just like the clusters has an expert group, also social economy has an expert group. And we also work in smaller working groups to get a bit more in detail about a certain topic. And one of these topics is clusters. Not the traditional competitive industrial clusters as you know them, but we had the intention to investigate how similar phenomena or similar structures, vehicles, whatever you might call them, are arising within the social economy as well. So therefore, we started this working group with approximately 24 social economy experts. And we started from the basic cluster concept, so from the traditional industrial concept where business meets public authorities, scientific centers, R&D, and industry. So we started from that let's say conceptual framework to look how similar structures would exist. But soon we found out that in the social economy they are slightly different, but they keep somehow the same trajectory, the same form. To do this, we have done a small mapping, a small identification. Yes.
Karel, just for your information, there is a kind of window in the bottom right of the
Okay.
screen. Yeah.
This is.
So we cannot
This is.
see that. Yeah. Just for your information.
Maybe it's better. It's the window
Now
of
it's perfect.
the meeting.
It's perfect.
Okay, perfect. So we started with a small mapping exercise. It was basically an open mapping exercise because nobody had done such a research, let's say, before. We were doing a small literature review, and we could approximately find 2 specific papers that were specifically on social economy clusters. So nothing more was already done or present, so it was very new. So that's why we started this explorative mapping where we had no fixed criteria because we expected quite some variation. So we also made a template, so all our 24 members went in their own backgrounds and their own ecosystems to look for similar ecosystems. And we gave them a template. This template was structured like this, so it worked on the identification, just very basic information, the description, so the year of creation, the geographical scope. Is it very, for example, as you know, proximity is key, but is a proximity, for example, on a city level, a regional level, inter-community level? Which type of actors are engaged? As I said, you work with basically 3 actors, but maybe for social economy there are more involved, etc. Also, the sector of activity is of course important, the priorities and why you cooperate within such a cluster. Then we went to the implementation. So what is the mission, who promotes, who are the stakeholders, basic stakeholders involved beyond just the cluster members. Which services are provided towards the members, and what are the resources? So where is the money coming from? Is it also like regular clusters that the members pay a fee, or are there grants involved, etc.? Also governance. So is there a one-on-one relationship with the governance models of social economy and the ones of a cluster? In social economy, usually that's more participatory governance and democratic governance, if you see what cooperatives are doing, for example. So we wanted to see how this works also in clusters, yes or no. And the evaluation, where the innovative aspect comes in. Is there an impact measurement present? Which are the main success and failure aspects, etc. And is there a transferability? So are there connections on an international level with other likewise clusters? So this is what the first mapping was. So we had 29 clusters. In the meantime, we are approximately around 45 already, but this was the initial mapping, and this was the distribution among the countries. Yeah, the UK is still in, because at that time the UK was still a member state. If you see what the priorities are of such a cluster, you will see that they are slightly different, or let's say entirely different than a regular industrial cluster, where an industrial cluster mainly pools together resources to get a competitive advantage, or to promote innovation within a sector, or to have common research capabilities. In a cluster, in a social economy cluster, the main reason why is usually job creation. So to employ people with disabilities on the one hand, but also general economic creation. So new businesses, new cooperatives, new associations to employ people in general. And the small part is target groups. So target groups are people who are usually excluded from the labor market. So these are the two that we see. A second one, and I'm very happy this was also so present, is that social innovation is one of the key priorities of a cluster. That means that clusters very often arise to promote social innovation. So not only technological innovation, not only R&D development for products, etc., but pure social innovation. Social innovation is basically you can see it as a methodology where people get together to solve a societal solution. And usually this is not possible just with one social enterprise. You need more enterprises, but you also need the government, you also need SMEs, you also need the research and the university. So by proxy, it's quite a natural evolution that social innovation is a core aspect of a social economy cluster. Of course, social cohesion is a second one. Also, this is more like a vague description of what a sector is doing. But the fourth one, environmental and ecological aspects, is also a key importance. It's not the biggest priority, but usually you see, for example, in clusters that are focusing on circular economy, that the ecological aspect, also the energy creation, is one of the core topics. Just like any other cluster, social economy clusters are also delivering services towards their members. And the most important one is, of course, facilitation of networking and collaboration. And other ones, and that is quite important for me, and a quite important phenomena, that these clusters are usually organized in a cross-sectoral manner. If you see priorities and the mission in the first part of the slide, then you get probably the impression that it is not to build a more competitive advantage for one specific sector, for example, construction. No, it's rather to build this job creation, to promote social innovation. So de facto, you go more cross-sectoral in the cluster. So many different sectors are engaged. So that is also what we see. We have some sectoral clusters, for example, in the creative industries, for example, in manufacturing, but these are rather scarce. So the composition of such a cluster is also very wide. We see usually that social economy enterprises are the backbone, but most of them have also traditional SMEs involved. I think that the Torino example that will be explained after me or later on in this session is a very nice example of a cluster where not only social economy or civil society is engaged, but also traditional SMEs. And for me, that is the most powerful model, of course, and that's the model that I want to promote the most, definitely in this presentation today. But of course, you see also other ecosystem actors such as research and innovation, just like in any other, but this is not so prominent. These are not so prominent present as in traditional clusters, let's say. So that's really a working point, the research part, the connection to universities, and of course the public authorities are usually also present, sometimes in a very critical mode, sometimes just as a flanking partner. So we call them actually clusters of social and ecological innovation, because after a while we were getting more and more knowledge, and we saw that there is or a social innovation purpose or an ecological purpose. And it's also a bit a policy-driven name, because we really want to promote the clusters. It's not a scientific research that we were doing. It's also somehow of a statement from the social economy side that we really want to promote the clusters to work on ecological innovation, but also on social innovation. We see actually two ways how they arise. The first one is when the government takes the initiative, which is very different from traditional clusters, of course. Sometimes we see that the government wants to change something locally or in the territory. They want to promote more jobs. They want to promote more social cohesion, more social innovation, and they really help to create such a cluster. This is the minority, but still there are quite some that are really initiated by government, which is completely different from the, let's say, the industrial clusters. And the second one is when they are organically grown, just like traditional clusters, and the drivers are, as I said, usually the social and the sustainable incentives, like social and ecological innovation, like job creation, but also, and that is very important, economic drivers. It's not because you have a social mission, it's not because you want to create social impact that you don't want to create also economic prosperity, and that you don't need to have a revenue, that you don't need to make profit. So the economic aspect is as important as the social and the sustainable aspect. And that is a key importance, because that opens a window for opportunity for cooperations with traditional clusters, but also with SMEs, because in the end, it's about access to markets, it's about trading, it's about cost saving, and it's about providing the services to the right client. The goal and the way why it's done is slightly different, but still the economic world is still very omnipresent, and that's a key important that's a key important lesson for us, that it's not only about the social impact or the environmental impact. And a last remark I want to highlight, and that was also already present in the previous slide, is that there is usually a fourth partner present in the framework of a social cluster, let's say. We have the SMEs, we have, or the social economy enterprises, we have the science or the R&D innovation units, we have the public authority, but most of the time also the community is very much present in such a cluster. And that's a very interesting fact, because certainly given this crisis that we see today, suddenly also traditional clusters, not suddenly, but traditional clusters are also opening way more up to cooperation with the community and the civil society. And I think that the clusters that we have pooled together, that we have investigated on, are a very nice example of that. In terms of innovation, we see basically four big building blocks of innovation. I have already highlighted the ecological innovation, the social innovation, and of course also economic innovation.
2 minutes.
Excuse me?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Yeah, perfect. I'm perfect in my schedule. And the third one is the technological innovation, and this is maybe something that would surprise you a bit, because you would not expect immediately a technological innovation in more social intended clusters, but this is actually not true. We have some very beautiful examples for where the cluster is purely set up to develop technological solutions for an ecologic reason or for a social reason. One of them is the development of robots to help people with disabilities in employing their manufacturing jobs. So there they combine manufacturing, very hard and classic industry with the social impact of employing people with disabilities. But because these people are not physically able to do this, they build together with 24 enterprises robots to assist them. Also light guidance systems. It's tip of technological development, but not for this really competitive advantage, but really to include more people in the labor market. For them, the spirit is we build a robot to hire 10 people more, not to fire 10 people more. And that is a bit how these technological innovation is also incorporated. If I would have more time, I could show you some videos and practical examples, but I think that the speakers after me will probably do this. So to end, we have the main outcomes. So social economy clusterization is quite recent. It's a very new movement. There is no research done. Actually, what we have been doing in our expert group is basically the first, let's say, quite decent research and the first mapping of such a clusters. The vast majority has really the territorial scope, so respects really the territorial principle of proximity. So usually they are organized in around a city or a region. Sometimes even it's a site, so the regeneration of an old industrial site that was provided by the municipality or by an industrial capacity, etc. The majority is cross-sectoral. I already explained why and how. Usually 3 to 5 different types of actors are present. So this is very ideal for the quadruple or even the quintuple helix model. I explained also how this works and what the difference is. The ideal format for us is really where the SMEs, traditional SMEs, traditional enterprises are combined with social economy enterprises in such a cluster. So there you also have a solution for the access to market problems, and really you can give some scale to many of the social enterprise initiatives. The majority are rather small and medium size, as well in the size of the amount of enterprises. So small and medium means between 30 to 50 enterprises are members, and also a lot of SMEs. The job creation is almost the #1 priority, together with social innovation and social cohesion, and they have they have huge multiple resources. So sometimes there are grants, many of them have also membership fees, but also sometimes they work with just a fee to explore technology, for example, or a fee to just host your activity over there. This is a small slide to compare, but I will not go into detail because I have already explained the differences between a traditional cluster and a cluster of social and ecological innovation. This is our final goal, to get a social economy in the cluster collaboration platform. This is what we are doing right now. I cannot tell you more, but within 1 month, I will be able to tell you more. So maybe I have to come back and then how we manage, but it's really our goal to also have the social economy in these dots on the map, and we are quite succeeding well. So I'm very happy. And this is just a summary slide. So if you want to use what I just have said somewhere else, you can just use this slide on the bottom. You will see a few of the example of social economy clusters, and it's just a summary of my resume. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I stayed within the time.
No, but it was very interesting. So I didn't stop you. Thank you very much, Karel. You are invited to return every week. So because this is really important for us, for everyone. So I hope to see you next week for sure.
Okay, wonderful. With pleasure.
Very, very, very interesting. So next one, Tony, it's your turn. Do you want to present?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So I will play this. Wait a second. Can you see my screen, or how because I haven't done it before? Here. Okay. Here I go. So I want to say thank you for the invitation and for giving me this opportunity of sharing the work we have been doing for a while now, and also to have Karel before us, just to explain the importance and the work they are doing on social economy. And
Tony, we are not seeing your screen.
You are not seeing, and what do I have to do?
You need to press the button between the mic and the video. There is a button with a screen, a small screen on the top of the GoToMeeting menu.
Wait. Go to meeting menu.
There is three icons. Okay, icons.
So
in the middle, you have one that is the one screen.
Okay, like this.
We will see.
Is there one?
Now, perfect.
So now I share the presentation, right?
Not yet. We are seeing your screen, but not the presentation.
Is there now?
No, probably you need to share not only one application, but everything in your screen. You should
okay, wait a second.
Try again.
I will. Okay.
Okay. Share all the screen. And now we see the GoToMeeting screen.
Yeah. And now I will play the presentation, right?
Yes, you are opening now the PowerPoint. Yeah.
Okay, now.
That's right.
Sorry for this. This is the technicality, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share this work we had on social innovation ecosystems. We have been working for a long time with experts in different fields, in different sectors, and we came to Dortmund in October to discuss on this issue. And the main result of this was a position paper which is published, and I have put the link at the end of the presentation so that everybody can read it. And the idea was to boost the new strategy for social innovation ecosystems in Europe. And this is going a little bit beyond clusters, and I will explain a little bit why, and is that we need to find the common goal, the shared ideas that boost people together to build these ecosystems. Okay, so and I will explain a little bit the key messages of this position paper, and I will stop in a model that we have developed at the University of Deusto and that we are setting with different institutions and also with the European Commission and different entities, because it's not only saying, yeah, we need to do this, but how do we do this, which is not an easy task, okay, just to put all these people together. So the first key message is every wave of digital technology needs a new wave of social technology and of social innovation if we really want to transform the full economy and society for the benefit of all. So it's not, and what we are seeing, and that was very clear in the presentation of Karel, is we have the traditional clusters and the social economy, and the idea here is not that we need one or the others, we need both of them and different type of clusters and collaborations, but we need to bring these two worlds together and to make the reflection together so that we have the economy and the competitiveness together with the societal needs and societal impacts coming together, and to think what type of society we want in the future. So the major challenge here is how to integrate this social innovation in all EU programs, and here is all the time this reflection on SSH research and innovation, if it's the same relevance than other type of sectors or disciplines. And our claim is that society, people should be in the front of all the things we do, because we are making society working, economy working for the benefit of society, not the other way around. So how we put this in the agenda in all the programs, and that's one of the challenges. Karel, I'll be very happy to work with you and to put different people that are working on this in contact with you, so that we can make the claim as well. And this is linked with the Horizon Europe mission-driven agenda. That one of the things we find is that we need to agree on common goals, and we know this might seem utopic in the sense that we know it's difficult to get everybody to agree on the same interests at the same time with the same rhythm, etc. That's not possible. But what we think is possible is to find common purpose-driven networks or clusters or these ecosystems, so that we find the contextual and the specific objectives for a community of actors and a community of stakeholders to find this shared prosperity, the win-win mechanisms, and building trust so that we can work together and find solutions together. And this solution, again, should be technology-driven, but also social-driven. And the following message is that we need this multi-level approach to be proposed in all EU community programs. And here, again, something that Karel was saying is we have city-level approaches, regional approaches, we have the smart specialization strategies, we have national policies or initiatives, we have the European framework, but we have also the international or the global framework. And here I brought this picture of the bike, because when we are riding the bike, we change from one level to another. And if it's working properly, we see this should be more easier than it is at the moment. Usually we are either in one level or the other, but we have to connect all these levels, because we have developed this concept of glocal, the global and the local coming together and interacting, so that we make the jump from one to another. And I will stop a little bit here. In this model, we have been developing with trial and error for over 10 years now. We have these 6 elements that start with an I: the internationalization, interdisciplinary, and intersectorial collaboration. These 3 on the right side of the screen are the collaborative drivers of the program. And the other 3, innovation impacts, not only scientific impacts in our case at the universities, but also societal impacts, knowledge and initiatives that work for the getting an impact into society, into the economy, into employment, etc. And inclusion, with the principles of leaving no one behind. So how we build this? The idea is that we make the interconnection so that we have a holistic approach to this. And it should be a process of change in the different stakeholders, also clusters included here, that are called to design a steady and deep and long-lasting institutional changes to overcome a number of divides that we found. The first divide is the operational level. I was telling before, the local and the global, and how we go from the institutional level, that is this yellow ball in the middle, to the international or the global level, which is the big blue globe. So that's we are more operational, going this multi-level. Among the disciplines to coordinate the responses to the complex societal challenges, and now the pandemic is giving us lots of challenges where we have to put the quadruple or quintuple or M helix, so many different stakeholders to work together. So this is the intersectorial collaboration, and we see here the government, the civil society, the academia, the business, but we included also sustainability as an axis of collaboration, just to bring this into the agenda.
Tony, one minute, please.
Yeah, I'm finishing. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is among stakeholders and with society to generate positive real impacts and innovative inclusive education, research and engagement actions. So the problem with all this is how we find a good governance and around middle ground space and collaboration so that this works. So that's my communication. So I hope we have time to discuss or for questions later. Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect, Tony, perfect. Thank you. You have fit perfectly with the time, and for sure we will have the occasion to define needs and solutions and comment on it. Thank you.
Okay,
Congratulations.
thank you.
So now it's time for James. James, do you want to present?
No, okay, no, I'm just going to talk if that's okay, Antonio.
Okay, thank you very much for coming and joining us. And
no, thanks to you, and good morning, everybody. So thanks for the invitation to share ideas on this, for me, really important topic, and one that I think has now moved us into a very interesting opportunity to do something different around the agenda for social economy. So I wanted to share two main points, I think. First, about social economy itself, and building a little bit also on what we've heard from Tony and from Carol, and secondly about clusters and social economy, and then from there reflect a little bit on the opportunities that the current crisis might be offering us to reset how we think about certain things and how we do certain things. Just to introduce myself first, sorry, I should have said I'm James Wilson. I work at Orchestra, which is the Basque Institute of Competitiveness in Spain, part of Deusto University, so I'm a colleague of Tony's, although I'm based in San Sebastian and Tony's in Bilbao. So my first point then on social economy, I think that there's a slight danger that we make a kind of artificial distinction here. And in my mind, we shouldn't be looking at social economy as something that's isolated and separate from what you might call normal economy. And I think this actually goes in line with some of the things that Carol's already mentioned when he talked about the social economy clusters and the types of actors we see within them, etc. In my mind, the social and economic elements of life can't be separated out so easily. Economic activity itself is inherently social because it responds to people's needs and desires. And so every type of economic activity is meeting some type of social need. So there is a social element to economic activity. And at the same time, social activity has important economic elements. It needs to generate revenue, to generate resources in order to take place. So I think that we have to be quite careful of the kind of separating out of kind of industrial clusters on one side and social economy clusters on the other, which I'll come back to in a moment. When we think of it from the firm's perspective, I think the reality is more like a spectrum, where we find enterprises with a very pure profit motive at one end of the spectrum and enterprises with a very pure social motive at the other end of the spectrum. But in the real world, I think almost all enterprises fit somewhere between that. They don't have either a purely economic or a purely social end. They actually fit it somewhere in that spectrum. So the question is, where do they lie on that spectrum in terms of the economic activities and in terms of their economic motives and in terms of their social motives? And I think that the response to the coronavirus has really illustrated this. Something I've been thinking on a lot over the last few weeks is we've seen many enterprises pivoting their production during this kind of resistance phase to trying to rally round and respond to the needs of our health systems in particular. And I think that firms have been doing that for a mix of economic and social rationale, which can't easily be separated. On the one hand, there's a very strong social rationale to want to be doing things to support the health system, to be able to change production towards activities that are really needed at this time. But on the other time, there's also a survival rationale for firms in order to change their production to areas which have an underlying economic rationale. Those mix of rationales, I think, comes across strongly in the responses of enterprises to the coronavirus itself. So if we move along to clusters and social economy, the kind of second point, again, I'm kind of wary of this black and white distinction between industrial clusters on the one hand and social economy clusters on the other. I think there's likely to be a spectrum with a lot of grey areas. And as we saw from Carol's presentation, you know, job creation, social innovation were the kind of top two rationales, in a sense, for social economy clusters. Those are also key rationales in many industrial clusters. And also within industrial clusters, we see an increasing movement towards kind of cross-sectoral in different ways. Clusters from the very early notion of clusters, Michael Porter's notion of clusters, are cross-sectoral by definition. But increasingly over recent years, we've seen, I think, clusters that are more and more cross-sectoral. As in your own cluster, Antonio, in Aragon, is clearly a cluster that crosses many sectors. So I also think that's something that we see in both the social and the economic sphere. And in line with Carol's comments on the mix of enterprises, if we think of this spectrum of clusters, from social economy clusters through to purely industrial clusters, then depending on the mix of enterprises, the integration of civil society, how technology is used, etc., we're going to be more on the scale towards social economy or more on the scale towards industrial. But I would suggest that almost all clusters fit between those two. Things. They're neither at one end nor at the other end of the scale completely. And again, I think if we go back to before the coronavirus time, we were already seeing quite a lot of interest in the role that industrial clusters can play beyond their narrow economic focus on boosting productivity. And that was being stimulated in particular by the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, where there's a general consensus that all actors should be contributing towards those sustainable development goals. So we were doing quite a lot of work at Orchestra prior to coronavirus, looking at how clusters were supporting the SDGs. And in fact, if we look at cluster policies across Europe, we can find that many cluster policies were already very conscious of the need to align what clusters were doing with the Sustainable Development Goals, and not just the Sustainable Development Goals 8 and 9 on economic growth and industry, innovation, infrastructure. We were also seeing clusters playing a real interest in how their firms and their actions themselves can contribute to a whole range of other Sustainable Development Goals. So I think that the notion of clusters supporting social goals is not a new one. It's something that was already emerging. But it's something that we've seen increasingly in the last few weeks and months, given the need to respond to a very big social challenge. So it's kind of thrown the light on this, in a sense, in a way that for me is a great opportunity to take it to the next level. So just to give an example, last year in the Basque Country, together with SPRI, the Basque Business Development Agency, at Orchestra, we organised a series of workshops for Basque cluster organisations to help them think strategically around which sustainable development goals their members can contribute towards, on the one hand, and how the cluster organisation itself can play a role in facilitating that contribution. And we had around 10 clusters participating in those sessions, and throughout the year we developed with them kind of strategic plans on how they would integrate the contributions to different sustainable development goals within their activities. So we can already see this type of social challenge being integrated into the work of what you might typically call industrial clusters. And the integration of concepts like Michael Porter's creating shared value has also been used an awful lot to try and understand how firms can create economic value for themselves at the same time as creating different types of social value in their communities. This is something we've worked again in the Basque Country, also with Alberto, who I see is here, and colleagues in Catalonia in Actio. They've been leading, I think, the development of, well, how do we integrate the concept of shared value into our cluster activities? And in a sense, I think clusters are ideal environments to experiment with this for two reasons. The first is that they are territorially rooted, again going back to Carol's point. So clusters are inherently rooted in the territory, and it's the territory where social challenges and social needs are felt. That's where you can relate to these challenges in the most explicit way. And secondly, clusters are based around collaboration. That is their core difference, the collaboration and the cooperative dynamic that exists within clusters. And to meet social challenges, we need to collaborate. So clusters themselves, being territorially rooted and being based around collaboration, I think are ideal institutions or ideal concepts for thinking about social economy challenges. And it really goes back to the very origins of the concept itself. Even before Michael Porter started using the word clusters, Giacomo Becchettini and his colleagues in Italy were exploring the socio-economic benefits of what they called industrial districts, which is, if you sense, like the pre-runner of the cluster concept. And Becchettini himself, the key thinker on this, he argued that this district or cluster was actually a socio-economic entity. So it wasn't an economic entity, it was a socio-economic entity, which is characterized by the active presence of both a community of people and a population of firms in one naturally historically bounded area. So we have, in the very early definitions of clusters, both the community and social side of it and the economic business side of it brought together in this one area. And I think that's something that we kind of forgotten a little bit when working on industrial clusters, that we need to turn back to in that sense. One route towards this, I think, is to pay more attention to what has become known as the foundational economy. And this is something that, again, the coronavirus crisis is shining a lot of new light on. The foundational economy essentially refers to those industries such as health, education, housing, utilities, food, the things that provide the very foundations for our societies. And the COVID crisis has really highlighted the importance of those industries, which are often forgotten. They're often considered to be kind of low-wage sectors that don't add so much value. And I think we're seeing in the coronavirus that actually add an awful lot of value. And so perhaps we need to reconfigure how we think about the foundational economy and its relation to the traded or industrial economy. And in that sense, there was a manifesto published last week or the week before by the Foundational Economy Initiative, which I think is very interesting in terms of thinking about how we do that. So I think moving on to opportunities, one thing that the coronavirus crisis is showing us is that there is the possibility to take forward this agenda in new ways. And if we look at the crisis itself, we published a paper on this at Orchestra a couple of weeks ago, trying to think about how regional responses to the crisis. We can distinguish between two phases, I think. The first is this resistance phase that we're currently in, where the key aspect is trying to pivot and reorientate our activities towards solving and supporting the health crisis. And that means all the things we're seeing with the great work that the ECA is doing in terms of bringing together clusters to rethink their activities, etc., to support that. But we're going to hopefully, not in the too distant future, be able to move beyond that resistance phase and into a reconstruction or renovation phase. And our economies are going to be quite damaged going into that, and we're going to have to find ways of rebuilding. And I think that that's where we have to think very carefully about how we do that. And I think we have an opportunity to reconstruct and renovate our economies in quite a different way. Instead of returning to business as usual, we should be looking to construct regional economies that are both economically and socially resilient and, of course, ecologically sustainable. And in my view, I think that will require us to stop thinking about the social economy and the normal economy as separate entities, and start thinking about the fact that all of our activities have to be socially and environmentally sustainable. So the way I would think of this, and again, this lines very neatly, I think, with Carol's comment on the idea of bringing social economy clusters into the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. And this is something I'm working as part of the consortium that's working on that platform at the moment, and it's something that we're trying to do, as Carol's mentioned, over the next few months. I think we should be looking to move all clusters along that spectrum. So that in different dimensions they're contributing to social challenges, resource efficiency, quality of employment, etc. These should be central aspects that are key in social economy clusters, but should actually also be key in all clusters. And I think one of the things we're trying to do on the collaboration platform will be to try and get all of clusters across Europe thinking about how they are contributing to resource efficiency, to societal challenges, to employment quality, and to all of those dimensions that Carol mentioned were so important in social economy clusters. And as I said earlier, clusters, I think, are one of the most powerful tools to do this because of their local roots and their basis of collaboration. They can really lead the way in binding together those social and economic dimensions as we go forward. So I think we're at a great opportunity to advance and accelerate what was already starting to happen beforehand, but now the light has really been thrown on it in a much more, in a much clearer way. And I think we can start to rebuild our economies in ways that that hopefully can take advantage of those opportunities. Sorry for not having an ordered presentation, but hopefully those thoughts will be helpful in taking forward the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you, James. It has been brilliant. It's near impossible for me to cut you on time, but brilliant, and I totally agree with your approach. I like the idea of not black and white, but a lot of colors in the middle, not only gray. Thank you. Next is Rafaela Scalisi. Rafaela, it's your turn. Do you want to present?
Thank you, Antonio. I will give you a brief introduction, and maybe I can share then the screen in order to focus on some aspects of Torino social impact. So can you hear me well?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay, so very briefly, Torino Social Impact, and thanks Carol for mentioning already our experience, is a territorial alliance born in 2017, and it gathers over 80 actors among companies, institutions, financial operators, charities, foundations, and third sectors, of course. They together compose an open platform and what we call the collective brand, aiming at strengthening and promoting the local social ecosystem towards Agenda 2030. They work together. We have all these actors working together in order to address the societal needs, combining both the technological aspects, emerging technologies, new financial tools connected to the impact finance and impact economy, and of course social entrepreneurship and social innovation. The mission is to make the Turin territory, Turin ecosystem, a place where social innovators, companies and investors can operate pursuing financial goals alongside social impact goals. And the social impact definition we are working on is based on 3 principles that are intentionality, so that to act with the aim from the beginning of generating social values, so it's not a ex post measurement of the social impact. Additionality, which means to operate in subcapitalized sectors which are mostly excluded normally by the market dynamics, and of course measurability with a method and tools that are able to apply ex-ante evaluation and ex-post measurement. So this is the introduction framework, and I will focus now on how it works, our alliance at the territorial level. I try to share the screen. Okay.
Sorry, at the top of the menu is the button between the mic and the video. And you should share all the screens. It's the better option, just to be sure that.
One moment. Is it available also if I'm connecting from the browser?
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know.
Okay, maybe it's here.
If you're on the browser, I think it is at the bottom, just next to the microphone camera. There's a screen. If you press that, it should share the screen.
Now should be.
Thank you, Roberto. Yes, now it is. We are seeing your screen. Yes.
Yeah. So I go ahead. Okay. This is the website of Torino Social Impact, so maybe it's easier for you to follow the description. So I was saying that this territorial alliance is composed by 80 partners. How is the governance? To take part in the platform, the actors just have to sign to subscribe to an MOU, to committing themselves in sharing ideas, projects, sometimes financial resources. The strategies is approved by a sort of an assembly among all the partners. I say a sort of because actually we are not a legal entity, it's an informal territorial alliance, and the operational structure is supported by two main partners of the alliance, which are the Bank Foundation and the Chamber of Commerce. The partners are composing somehow a cluster of competencies and activities, and we have partners from the public sector, as I was saying, from finance and philanthropy. We have three banks, national group, very important financial institutions, and also philanthropy, so bank foundations, family foundations. We have many actors, up to 12, connected to the sector, to the context of research and technology transfer. We have 6 actors in the sectors of incubators and accelerators. We have many associations and actors that provide with competence and facilities for co-working and improving skills on social innovation. And of course, the third sector and private companies, social enterprises. There are more than 25 actors in these two last categories. What we do, but first of all, we have a very open approach. So any organization that is willing to cooperate just have to contact us, and we welcome them if they are willing to share some of their know-how or resources to the ecosystem strengthening and building. We have 4 categories at the end of activities that we provide, and there are services, projects, opportunity and financing, and the events. How it functions is, of course, each partner in the framework of their activities, they activate social impact projects to composing a large set of initiatives that we try to promote as a whole. but there are also many cross-cutting projects that we activate from the central office, and these are aimed at building common infrastructure at disposal of all the ecosystem. And of course, there are many marketing activities that we put in place in order to promote nationally and internationally the ecosystem of Turin. To focus a little bit on the COVID emergency, of course, as a platform, we are not directly operating on the ground. So we asked ourselves how we could help in this situation. And at the moment, we have 4 streams of actions. The first one is to disseminate as much as possible all the information related to the activities that the partners are putting in place. As I mentioned, we have from foundations to charities and social enterprises. So we have a lot of initiatives that must be disseminated. And so we, beside the website and the social media that are, of course, effective tools, we activated very customized lines of communication in order to reach citizens, because we have the Solidarity Network that was launched by Caritas together with the city of Turin, and they provide food and medicines to the elderly. They bring home food to the elderly people. They also help the poor. So this is one of the activities. We have this Turin City Love initiative launched by one of the technological partner, which is a sort of open innovation network to tackle social divide, digital divide in this moment. Many children and students are at home, but they are not in the same condition as far as technological equipments are concerned. Many other initiatives are on the ground, such as map of shop that converted to home delivery, and we have dozens of initiatives that we are trying to disseminate.
Rafaela, sorry,
yes,
1 minute, extra
okay.
minute.
Yes, we are also very briefly, we are elaborating questionnaire to monitor the impact on third sector of the COVID emergency. So we are going to disseminate in May, and this could be interesting to be shared further in maybe in the future with this group. We are also launching a discussion with the public sector, between the public sector and the social enterprises, because many social enterprises that are dealing with welfare and health and education services are in serious difficulties because the remodulation or cancelling of the services are creating contractual changes, missed payment and safety problems on the places of work, and this is not easy when public procurement is in place, because there is a legal framework which is very strict, and now they need flexibility. So we are trying to find a territorial model to operate in order to guarantee both the public sector officers and the beneficiaries and the social enterprises. And the last thing that we are launching, which is quite it is very important and interesting for us, and I conclude, is data intensive monitoring research to identify connection between the social disadvantages and the impact of the epidemic in some specific groups, because it's considered quite plausible that the epidemic presents a clear social gradient, with social disadvantaged group being more exposed and more vulnerable to the infection and to the economic impact. So this is at the beginning. We do that with the Epidemiological Research Center of the city of Turin, of the University of Turin, and with other research actors, and will be, I think, quite interesting, but we are at the beginning. Sorry for being over my time.
Thank you. Grazie mille. Rafaela, I know that it's a big challenge to summarize so much things in so few minutes, but thank you very much and congratulations. And we wait for the next news about those research and actions. Thank you very much. So now it's time to jump to the next block. You know that you can use your needs also to comment on our previous interventions, and or perhaps introduce new points. Okay, the general subject for today is social economy and innovation, and the floor is yours.
Yes, Antonio, can I speak very briefly, because I have to leave?
You are always the same, Jaime.
Because I have to leave. I have to leave now in the 10 minutes.
Okay.
No, I just want to make 2 comments on what James Wilson told. It was a very interesting and brilliant speech. The one is about shared value from Michael Porter. I think there is another concept that is also very important. That is the concept of community. When we speak about social economy, we speak about communities and the importance of having very strong communities. And I think that the clusters can have here a very important contribution, trying to reinforce the social connections between people. We have the study of Geoff Morgan, that is a very well-known person in the UK that has done a lot of work on social communities and social innovation. It is very interesting. The second one, to be very briefly, is about the question of the foundational economy. We speak now about the financial economy, but we speak also about the low-touch economy. That's to say, we are going to have a time in which people will have to be more distant, will not to touch so much in the things. And I think that also in this low-touch economy, there will be lots of opportunities for the social activity. That's all. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you, Jaime. So you know that today we have a special session. We have still 27 minutes for this video conference, and we will split it then between needs and solutions. More points, more interventions. There is a lot of expertise here. We need to hear you.
Antonio, can I comment briefly?
For sure, Alberto.
Yeah. First of all, the participant today is very outstanding. Great intervention from Carla, James, and also the last one. Really, what James was saying about this intimate connection between the social and economic aspect that are happening in cluster are really something that we are trying to diffuse in the last 2 years, and cluster really are the right and the proper environment for implementing initiatives that have both an economic and social value. And today, in this context of crisis, we really need to use all the synergies and to promote projects that contribute both to economic development, but also to contribute also to make people more included in the society, all this kind of thing. So I think that this is something that also in the program that the Commission is going to launch on this aspect of taking into account these aspects of cluster, and this potentiality of clusters really are a good element to take into account.
Thank you very much, Alberto. We need to hear you in another session with all the time that you need to explain whatever you are studying now. That we need, we know that it's important. Thank you.
Thanks, I am at your disposal.
Good morning.
Yeah.
May I speak? It's Anais. Just a quick question. So thank you all for the presentation. In terms of measuring the impact of all your initiatives, and I think Rafaela also mentioned some questionnaires that you're sending now, do you use any specific methods to measure the impact that you have? Just because I use normally in some projects that I'm in the social return on investment, and it does help to convince the importance also of social economy, because you then have some, let's say, number, and you can show the real impact, because until now this is one of the points that we've been struggling to show, the real impact of social economy and social enterprises. So I was just wondering if some of you use specific methods, and yeah, and if they are, which one?
Excellent point. James.
Yeah, I can't. I'm afraid I don't have much to add on specific methods, but just to I would reiterate that certainly in the process we had last year with the Basque clusters around all of this, one of the key issues that kept coming up time and time again was the importance of being able to demonstrate to cluster members the impact of these activities towards the social development goals. So in order to get the members on board, it was very important to have quantitative ways of demonstrating the impact of their activities. It's a work in progress here. Well, it's been put on hold a little bit at the moment, obviously, but we had planned to have a whole second year of workshops with the clusters to start going deeper into, well, how do you do that? How do we actually measure the impact of each activity and therefore communicate it effectively? But we'll come back to it when we get the chance.
Rafaela, do you want to comment?
Yes, two things. The questionnaire will be disseminated to the social enterprises and cooperatives in order to evaluate the impact of the coronavirus outbreak. So it's not impact measurement of our action, but I wanted to say that one of the common infrastructure that we have built as a Torino Social Impact, so that as a platform, is a Center for Impact Measurement and Evaluation, a competence center, which is supported financially supported by a number of players of the ecosystem, but is at the disposal of all the ecosystem. And we launched it in last November, and we started to apply a common method to measure some actions of the partners. And the idea is to study and develop a method also for our activity. I have to say that Torino Social Impact was launched in end 2017, so at the beginning we're just 12 partners, now there are 80, so we are quite at the beginning, even if we have made a lot of work. But if you are interested in one of the next sessions, I could ask to our impact measurement expert to participate and illustrate how we are working out with this center.
That will be a wonderful topic for our next session, I think. Tony, would you comment?
Yes, I want to share what we are doing since several years now on the dimensions for identifying societal impacts of our research projects and the ones that we are working with several stakeholders. In the last count, we realized we are working with 1,050 stakeholders outside the university. That means the capillarity. So we found this collaboration with the stakeholders. One of the three dimensions we are counting to see or to give the level of social impact to these projects. So we have three dimensions mainly. One is the contribution of the projects to their own thematic or area of application. The second one is the collaboration with the different agents or stakeholders. And the third one is the contribution of the projects further away from the scientific impacts. And that means what James or Karel were saying about these connections between the economic and the societal impacts coming together. So how we are doing is opening a call and asking researchers and stakeholders, giving inputs on what they are doing together and demonstrate that they are doing things in these three dimensions and giving evidence on these impacts. So I can share maybe if you want a short description on what we are doing, and maybe it can be useful for other people.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Karel, would you comment? Karel?
Yeah, my microphone was muted again. No, thank you very much for these contributions and also suggestions. That would be great. I wanted to add also another thing, and that's the French concept of you have in French you have pôle de compétitivité, but now you also not now since quite a long time. I don't know the exact history, but you have also pôle de coopération. Which is some kind of the social economy counterpart of the competitive clusters. That is a very interesting phenomena, which is to be supported on the one hand, but also to be careful on the other hand. Why we really need to support is because the state is really promoting and pushing to get also social economy clusters in the form of pôle de coopération. But on the other hand, you create also a bit more segregation. And that's what James was also highlighting, that we need to be careful to create really two different economic worlds, because in the end, that is somehow an artificial setup. And that's what we need to prevent. I'm not saying that this is happening in France, but of course, if you have a very specific policy to support another type, then you create de facto a bit two streams. But what I know, and that is of course the reality, is that many of them are also approaching each other definitely in these days, and that they are also cooperating amongst each other. That's also a bit where we need to be careful from the European point of view, that we don't promote social economy clusters as the only one truth. That is what we really want to prevent. Also from a DG Grow perspective, we are of course the internal market, which is an open philosophy where cooperation should be done between every type of enterprises. And it's not only the social economy that delivers on social impact, it's any enterprise that should deliver on impact. And the SDGs is a very interesting point to get in a traditional cluster, because the values and the resources that social enterprises might have might bring a lot of knowledge on social impact, on sustainability, on ecological impact for the traditional companies within a cluster, while this is not usually their core business. So there is a big window of opportunity for integration in traditional clusters or industrial clusters. That's what I wanted to contribute. But maybe it would be a good idea to invite also somebody from a French pôle de coopération, because they can way better explain how the system works and how the government also supports really this creation. Because one additional point I want to raise, and then I will stop again, is that usually, and that's what I know, these pôles de coopération were created because the industry was gone. In some regions, there was a very traditional industry, for example, of textiles or mining or whatever, but suddenly due to globalization, the industries were gone. And then the government supported cooperation between civil society and social enterprises to create new industrial activity. And that is where the pôle de coopération is I think, in my as far as I know, where it started. So maybe that's also an interesting point of view.
Thank you very much. Perfect, very interesting, and we could invite them for sure. Another comments? We have a lot of expertise here. I say again, please share with the rest.
Antonio, all of you, very, very good presentations. I was not aware that these models and studies were so organized. I'm very happy with that. And I think for making these models and these studies, of course, you have listed the players, the people that now can act. So to prepare for the return to normal life, and even for during this crisis to have actions from these people, we need to depart from these studies and models and go to them and know what they're doing now in this crisis and get the best practices, spread the good best practices around, and have the social real life helped, because the needs are really many, and we have to have the ones that are already prepared to help in a good way to do it. Another thing that I feel is that there are, I don't know if they're organized or how they act, but sometimes I participate in hackathons only for social ends. One is Hack for Good, the other one is Hack for Aging Well, and they find solutions, technological and non-technological solutions that may help people. While I was seeing your presentations, it came to my mind a group that was awarded the first prize that created in 1.5 days, they created an app to help refugees that don't know the language to access doctors and help for identifying diseases and needs related to health. Maybe something similar could happen with this moment of crisis. People that just got unemployed or have no family around or whatever, they have specific needs that those players that you identified for creating these models can help.
Thank you very much, Aurora. You are right, as always. Now it's time to speak about solutions. You have suggested some. Would you suggest more solutions? Who will propose some solutions for those needs and opportunities?
I think it's nice. I think actually having this talk and bringing social economy to the table for other clusters is already part of the solution for me, because we're talking about it, which is something that I've missed in the past, especially in the, let's say, cluster, because we work with health, and but still it always seemed that social economy is something completely different and disconnected. And I think it's nice that we can move this message that social economy also bring growth and is a competitive advantage. So I think already this kind of talks for more clusters that you maybe not so familiar with this concept is really good. And the second one is to keep on pushing. I don't know if there's any specific, like cross-sectorial measures, especially in the COVID funds that will come, and to ensure this, that it has to be part of the solution. So I think as a solution and a proposal for future funding, we should keep on pushing the importance of not seeing social economy just as NGOs and whoever, but that really a whole bunch of companies that can provide growth to the EU. And especially, I think now it's a good opportunity. It's a bad situation, but it's a good opportunity.
Perfect, nice. We have proposed the creation of a task force, a formal task force at European and country level that will continue with the work of this group in a more formal way. And it will be wonderful to take in between the goals of this task group to maintain and strengthen the link between or I don't know if it's a link or it's a continuous line, as James said, between social and industrial clusters. Yeah, totally right. More solutions.
Antonio,
Yeah.
can I come in at this point?
Oh, sure, For sure.
Yeah, here's Ulla speaking. Okay, so I think this is really a point we're trying since, let's say, more than a year, when we realized the need to bring social economy and clusters closer together. And that's why also with very small steps, that's why we used our two different expert groups, and we are also trying to bring them somehow together on the topic. And that's why Carl is heading this working group of our expert group of social economy experts. But I think likewise also, when we look now at the cluster expert group, we have to see, particularly now when we have to review what we are doing in view of the COVID-19, whether they are having also, let's say, a subgroup of the cluster expert group tackling this in view of the crisis might be something interesting. And that's why we need to see how we can combine, Antonio, what you have proposed as a task force with maybe what we can also do via the expert group, and whether we can have I'm not yet sure how this can work, having an extended part of the expert group, because the last thing we want to do on European level, creating new formal structures, takes unfortunately an awful lot of time. You cannot imagine how long it took us to come up with this cluster expert task force. So that's why I try to find a way that we can be operational quite quickly, but I hope that some of the emergency measures can be used for this. But also one area where we can maybe also formalize it much more, because on social economy, the commissioner who is responsible, the commissioner for employment, is tasked to come up with an action plan for social economy. And but he has this in a more long-term perspective for second half of 21. But in the run-up of there, I think with the work we are doing here, this is something which should be very well placed and should then become part of the action plan. And via being part of the action plan, also having access to funding which comes from different kind of sources, meaning like the social fund or so. So I think that opens us a new door. So this is one way we also take into account, and of course we are working also very closely with our colleagues of DG Employment on this. I just wanted to add this additional dimension.
Very, very interesting, Ulla. Yeah.
Antonio,
sorry.
Can I jump in one moment? Albert again.
Sure.
Ulla, many thanks for this remark. I think it's very, very necessary. In these days, I had some bilateral contact and also meeting when we were still possible, end of February, with a colleague based here in Barcelona that is participating in the expert group on social economy, Mr. Roderick Hegel. And we found so many grounds of common thinking regarding clustering and social economy, what they can do together. So I really fully support, if it's possible, this even a common session together, the two expert group. I think it will be very, very beneficial, and it's really a great field of opportunity for working together in this sense. And actually was what already 2 years ago in Sofia we start thinking this regarding also the concept of share value and how they are applicable to clusters. So fully support this thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto. Roderick is also a member of my expert group on social economy cluster. So I'm very happy you getting closer to each other in Barcelona. Wonderful to see.
More comments. I totally see the opportunity to join or at mix at some level both expert groups. Okay. Yeah.
Antonio, can I don't want to become negative right now, but maybe we also need sometimes a bit of a reality check, because I'm very much applauding and appreciative for this initiative, and I'm fully endorsing, but that's why I also chaired our study on cooperation between traditional and social economy that we have published last year. There are also many mismatches. And one of the mismatch, and it's not really a mismatch, it's a perceived mismatch, is let's say a negative perception from the two sides and the creation of two sides. And we were actually also blamed from the Commission by publishing the study in that way, and that learned us a lot as well. But if you go into the study, you will see so many examples of good cooperation, but on the other hand, also a lot of preoccupations from both sides. And just to explain how this was existing on both sides, when I was introducing this study to the expert group of traditional clusters, everybody was very interested. Everybody was really, they said, okay, this is really interesting to see how it happens. But during the lunch or during the coffee, some people approach me, yes, but is there really like this economic activity? Is it not, are they not all running on grants? Is it not just to entertain, not to entertain, but to employ people with disabilities, etc.? That is not really our core business. So there were, you saw immediately, even though that people were much interested, people who run everyday businesses, it's not their core business to be aware or to create social impact de facto like a social enterprise does. And it also existed on the other side, because when I present what a traditional cluster is doing in my expert group and how we should work more on economic models to become sustainable, then they say, yeah, but they only want to make shareholders more wealthy, etc., etc. So immediately there is a huge bias of people that have in their mind some kind of perceivement of the other side. But that's something we really have to be careful in the language how we speak, and mea culpa also from our side. And I'm trying to really be careful on how to approach. And James also highlighted that in our language we sometimes create a segregation ourselves, but also in the reality, in the daily reality of an SME, their core business is not thinking about what will my social impact be today, but by bringing them on a local point together more structurally will bring some openness. And I'm really a believer of that, and therefore we need brokers. And the brokers can be, for example, a cluster manager or the chambers of commerce, or people that really are not paid or delegated to bring these worlds together and to find synergies beyond the traditional chains. And after a while, I think these chains will be closer connected, but it will not happen just from today to tomorrow. There should be a more added value. And for example, the SDGs is one way how to deal with it, because many companies will be forced to think more about their sustainability, but they don't know how. So also in form of consultancy, etc., that might be a big opportunity. That's something, it's I don't want to spoil the game, but it's also a bit of a reality check, because for us in our group, we are all convinced, and we work a lot together over the last few weeks, but in the daily reality of an SME, it's not their main occupation. So, and the same for a social enterprise, and that's where we also need to take stock about.
The good news is that now we have a common enemy.
That's true. That's very true. That might change a lot, indeed.
Yeah, that's the real opportunity now, just to create bridge, because people is moving together to fight this coronavirus, and that's, we need the samples, we need to show the possibilities, we need to create this to facilitate those collaboration, and I think that we have in our hands the probably the biggest opportunity that we have had in long years to create those bridges.
Antonio, I fully agree with you. Life has changed dramatically, and also the view of business and how we will have to restart. That's why I think when we are now planning for the restart, we should see how much we can put this in. And I think that's something we should work in, that this thinking is part of the restart. and that's why we should try to work more on this. But I will have to leave, so thanks a lot. It was a great session, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Ula. Yes, we need to close. Thank you, everybody. It has been a very interesting session. We have learned a lot. I will encourage you to add your comments or your proposal and documents on the forum. Please go to the forum, share there the information, okay? And we will for sure have a next session, if possible, next week about this, because it's critical. It's totally critical. Thank you, everybody. See you soon, I hope.
Thank you,
Goodbye,
Antonio.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.